I'll introduce Dr. Nickell here. Dr. Nickell runs our Precision Cattle Technology Group. This is a new group within Merck Animal Health. We've made a fairly large investment in it. And this whisper that he's going to be talking about today is the first of many tools that we'll have for cattlemen across the country to use in their animal health program to help either diagnose disease or with disease prevention. And it's kind of exciting to be in this space because it's brand new technology, and I think you'll all really be interested. Dr. Nickell.
First of all, can you all hear me? Does that work? Okay. Well, Jim, thank you very much. Alex, thank you. And as Jim mentioned, my name is Jason Nickell. I'm a veterinarian with Merck Animal Health, and we're going to spend the next few minutes talking about different aspects of bovine respiratory disease. And so we're gonna spend a little time talking about this animal that honestly is predisposed to the condition. We're going to talk about why that is, and how those issues tend to conspire to setting this animal up for BRD. We're going to talk about some of the diagnostic challenges that we currently have in diagnosing BRD, and why we need more tools in this space to do a better job to more accurately identify these animals sooner rather than later, but then also to be more precise in order to reduce our treatment costs, as well as ensure that we are using our tools as judiciously as we can. And so that's where we're going to spend most of our time here over the next few moments. I wanted to take just a moment to give you a little bit of background about myself. I'm originally from Northwest Missouri. My dad's a veterinarian. He's still in practice there, has been there for a little over 40 years. And from a young age, whether I wanted to or not, I was with him dragging a foremost chute down various dirt roads around in Northwest Missouri. And I just realized the irony here of having a foremost chute whenever we're dealing with when we've got a preferred chute sitting here. So that's not a plug for Foremost, and I apologize from anybody from Preferred here. So that was not intentional by any means. But anyway, obviously I'm a veterinarian. My brother's a veterinarian and my wife's a veterinarian. And we were all together about 3 weeks ago, and it dawned on me, we need something else to talk about. And so and so thankfully my sister and her husband are not veterinarians, and so that helps balance things out, but it's definitely lopsided conversation at family get-togethers. But I graduated from the University of Missouri in 2003. I spent the next 5 years in private practice, then had an opportunity to go back to school, to leave practice and pursue a different role, if you will, within the profession, and completed a PhD at Kansas State University in epidemiology. At that point in time, I was told, well, actually when I left practice, I was told I was going to the dark side. And then at Kansas State, when I finished up there and decided to go into industry, I was told that I was going to the dark side. And then when I was at Bayer and left research and development and went into more of a tech service role, I was told I was going to the dark side. And so it just, there's various levels of dark sidedness, I guess, if you will, within this profession. I'm assuming we can all make analogies to that in your day-to-day lives as well, but it's just been an interesting observation. But as Jim mentioned, I'm the Associate Director for Precision Cattle Technologies. And that is a new division within Merck Animal Health. And so our mission within Precision Cattle Technologies is to develop solutions to help our customers assess risk, detect disease early, and make treatment decisions through predictive analytics that lead to improved productivity and validated antibiotic usage. Okay? And so obviously that's different than the typical box that you would fit a pharmaceutical company in. So the first question may be, why are we doing this? Okay, and it's like a lot of other things. There's a lot of reasons why things occur. I think first and foremost is that we recognize the need to keep our customers economically viable to maintain our own business, and so we want to provide more tools in order to help you all stay financially fit. Whether we want to admit it or not, there are a lot of other pressures on this industry that weren't there a decade ago. Okay, things like judicious antibiotic use, things like animal welfare. Our consumers want to know how the animals that's being raised for their food, how it's being done, and they're going to be very critical and vocal at times. And so we see that, and so we see that there is opportunity to address that, get out in front of that, and have tools to ensure that we are abiding by ways that's going to allow them to continue to buy that product. And whether we want to admit it or not, labor is an ongoing issue, okay? And so does anybody in here have issues with labor, retaining labor, keeping labor? Okay, I see a lot of hands. And honestly, this is something to a person, this is what we hear, even so much more so than disease or the markets or whatnot. It's keeping labor, training labor, and retaining that labor, okay? And so if we can not necessarily utilize technology to take the place of a human, but rather to optimize his or her ability to do their job, that's a win, and that will help us down the road. But then utilizing a number of different tools that we have at our disposal, and we're going to talk about one of those today, utilizing big data and artificial intelligence in order to help us do so. So how are we doing this? Okay, so obviously our internal expertise at Merck is not set up to just jump right into this. All right, so we are building on the expertise at hand, but we're also looking at partnerships. And so as an example, we're working with Microsoft to develop our cloud-based database. Okay, we're making investments, Whisper being one of them, but also making investments in other startups that help us in this space. Okay, so we are looking outside of Merck to help us in this endeavor. And so and all that aside, let's start talking about BRD. Okay, and this is something that you all have seen in the past, but I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. The bovine respiratory disease complex is just that. It is a complex. Okay, we can't point to necessarily one variable or another that we can say most of the time it's due to this or most of the time it's due to that. It's due to a multifactorial cycle, all of that working together in order for BRD to be manifested. Okay, so we have that animal. That animal is exposed to different pathogens, viruses and bacteria. We know all the names, right? We put that animal into an environment that stresses that animal, causes it to be its immune system to be reduced, and we end up with bovine respiratory disease, okay? And actually, as we begin to think about it, this is really the case for a number of different syndromes that we see all the way through the production cycle. Okay, as another example, take foot rot. Okay, obviously we have to have the animal. They have a very soft interdigital space. The bacteria that cause foot rot are always in the environment, but until we set them up and put them in an environment where we create a wound within that space, we don't see foot rot until that happens. Okay, so all of this has to work in tandem. And unless we're talking about something like rabies, it's very unlikely that a pathogen all by itself can generate disease. Okay, we generally have to have this interaction between the animal, the pathogen, and its environment. Okay, we can go into a lot of detail. Time's not going to let us do that, so we're going to focus on the animal, on the calf. So the bovine possesses a number of anatomical, physiological, and immunological characteristics, if you will, that sets it up for BRD. And we're going to talk about just a handful of those. But if you compare the bovine to the horse, okay, that bovine has roughly, based on its body weight, has roughly 50% less lung tissue than that horse does. okay? But yet it utilizes oxygen at a much greater rate, okay? And this makes sense. I mean, this animal right here is bred to be an athlete, all right? This animal right here is not necessarily a conventional athlete, although I have been reprimanded before on the dairy side. That dairy animal could be classified as a metabolic athlete. Okay, we're asking a lot of those animals. On the beef side, perhaps not so much, but just speaking in terms of the anatomy, the calf has 13 ribs. Those lungs go out to the 11th rib. That horse has 18 ribs, and that lung field goes all the way out to rib 18. Okay, so it possesses a great deal more of lung tissue, meaning that the bovine is relatively sensitive to losing lung tissue because it doesn't have a lot to begin with. Okay? Now there's a number of other characteristics, and I'm not going to go into detail, but there's a number of other anatomical features that cause this animal to be set up for BRD. But at the end of the day, we have an animal that doesn't have a lot of lung tissue to begin with. It's very inefficient in moving oxygen, and we don't have a lot of the lobes of the lung of that animal do not communicate well, and so all of this sets it up for being predisposed to BRD. And so again, BRD is a complex, okay? We can't put all the blame on pathogens. We can't put all the blame on the animal. We can't put all the blame on the animal's environment, okay? All of this works in tandem in order for BRD to be manifested, okay? So all that being said, we've got an animal that is first and foremost, before anything else happens, we have an animal that's predisposed to developing pneumonia or bovine respiratory disease, okay? Now we're going to turn our attention to how we diagnose this condition currently. Okay? So let's take a step back and let's think about this animal through the lens of predator-prey mentality. Okay? So in biology, there's a number of prey animal defense mechanisms that we're all familiar with. Okay? They may play dead, they may use camouflage, they may run. This is obvious what happens here, and we don't have a lot of leopards around here that I'm aware of, but if anybody has had a dog with a muzzle full of porcupine quills, you know exactly where I'm coming from, okay? And so, that being said, cattle are a prey species, and they're hardwired to exhibit that predator-prey mentality, okay? And so for anyone that has seen a sick calf out in the pasture that feeds cattle and sees from a distance an animal that looks slightly off, what is the one way, unless they're really, really ill, how do we elicit that predator-prey response? You just walk up to them, right? You walk up to them and all of a sudden this head comes up. Okay, or that animal gets up and walks away or runs away, right? And so the bovine's main defense against a perceived threat, which in many cases honestly is us, their response to that threat is to appear healthy, okay? Because in their mind, innately, if they appear healthy, they're not as at risk to from that predator, okay? And so the BRD diagnosis, let's begin to break this down. The BRD diagnosis is basically made up of two things. One is detecting that animal, first and foremost, and we do that right now through visual observation, whether that be in a pen or in a pasture, but then also confirming that diagnosis in a chute, and we generally do that with a rectal thermometer, okay? And we're going to come back to that here in a moment. But if we take a step back and we look at the ability to diagnose disease in companion animals, whether that be a dog or a cat or a horse, and then even possibly our children, this is a much different thing. Okay, these companion animals and our children trust us enough to convey the fact that they are ill. Okay, they don't see us as a threat, and so they're willing to convey the fact that they're sick. Okay, based upon what we just talked about, when that animal is feeling ill, it doesn't see a parent, it doesn't see a caretaker, it sees something a little bit different. Okay? And so again, it's not willing, when it sees this, it's not willing to convey this. Okay? It's wanting to convey the fact that, hey, I'm healthy, I'm good, don't even try anything, right? And so that's where the challenge is. And so in a perfect world where we didn't have to deal with this predator-prey hurdle, if you will, and again, we're looking through it through the lens of BRD, we could basically divide our population into two bunches. One, animals with BRD and animals that do not have BRD. And if that were the case, we would be able to have a test that was 100% accurate all the time. We could draw a line down through these two groups of animals, and this whole thing would be extremely easy, okay? And that is not the case, okay? So practically speaking, what happens is that these two populations tend to overlap. And so the animals that we diagnose and subsequently treat for bovine respiratory disease is composed of animals that not only are truly ill, but it's composed of animals that don't have BRD at all, okay? And so in addition to that, obviously there's animals that are correctly diagnosed as being healthy, but then also animals with BRD that go undiagnosed for the duration of the life of that animal, all the way through slaughter. Okay? But we're going to focus our attention here, because these are animals that we can get a hold of today. And so what is the cost of this? Okay? So what is the cost of treating animals that don't need it? Okay? Well, first and foremost is that if they don't need it, there is a cost of removing that animal from its environment, putting it in a chute, stressing that animal out, and putting it back. Okay, so that's stress number one, okay, or cost number one, if you will. There's a performance cost to that, and it varies, okay, but there is a cost. The other cost is obvious. Okay, we have a lot of good tools at our disposal, a lot of good tools. Okay, a lot of classes of drugs that we currently have availability to. That are highly potent, that stick around for long enough to get that animal back on its feet. But because of that, they're expensive too, right? And so if we're putting drugs into animals that do not need them, obviously there is a physical cost to that. We're putting good money after bad, all right? And so there is a cost to doing that. But as I spoke earlier, and these issues are not going to go away, there is a lot of public pressure that is causing our industry and my profession to rethink what we're doing to ensure that we are using our products in a manner that is satisfactory to not only food animal medicine, but also to human health as well. Okay, and so it begs the question is that if we're utilizing a test, a diagnostic test that's highly inaccurate, are we doing a good job of ensuring judicious antibiotic use as well? Okay, obviously a little bit softer of a topic to discuss, and one that doesn't currently have a dollar sign attached to it, but something that is not going to go away anytime soon. Okay. And so let's look at clinical signs of BRD. So whenever you all see an animal with bovine respiratory disease, what do you see? Okay. Well, the first thing that usually causes you to focus in on an animal is that animal's depressed. Okay. That animal obviously looks different than everybody else. Okay. As you start looking at that animal a little bit closer, you're going to see other things, okay? You might see nasal discharge. You may see discharge from the eyes, right? This would be kind of what you're looking for. And really, the color of the mucus is insignificant, but you're going to see stuff that just doesn't look right, all right? If you're lucky, you may hear this animal cough. A lot of times you're not going to hear him cough, and the reason that you're not going to hear him cough is because it hurts. It hurts these animals to cough, and so if they don't have to cough, they're not going to cough, okay? If they've been off feed for a while, off water, they're gonna look shrunk. They're gonna look thin. If we find them, we bring them to a chute. In most cases, they're gonna have a fever. Okay, and if we don't address this situation in time, we could lose that animal, right? So by and large, these are the tools that we have to diagnose disease, to diagnose BRD with. Okay. Now, what are the issues with these clinical signs? We'll break this down a little bit here. So depression or lethargy. Well, depression or lethargy, it sure could be BRD, but there are other things that cause animals to be depressed. Okay, acidosis or grain overload. That will cause animals to be depressed. Heat stress, an injured animal, all those will cause animals to be depressed. Ocular and nasal, and these are just examples. We could spend multiple hours in here just saying everything that caused depression, but these are just examples. Ocular and nasal discharge sure could be BRD, but obviously pink eye, something you all I'm sure have seen from time to time. It could be ocular injuries. It could be actually allergic rhinitis. Okay, if we've got different types of hay that they've developed allergies to, it's low prevalence we think, but it happens. Okay. Gauntness or thinness. Obviously, it could be BRD, but we also could be dealing with some type of a scours issue, coccidiosis or other. It could be an injury, could be other things. And then fever, it could be BRD. It could simply be these animals are hot. It could be grain overload. Okay, it could be heat stress. And so what we're saying here is that all of the visual signs, all the clinical signs that we use to diagnose bovine respiratory disease are not specific for the disease itself. And that's where the misclassification comes into play. That's why we end up treating a lot of animals that don't have BRD to begin with. Because the clinical signs that we use to diagnose BRD are also associated with other disease syndromes. Okay? And so up till now, let's just summarize real briefly. So we've got an animal that is prone to developing BRD. We didn't talk about it, but just briefly, but we create an environment that's conducive for BRD. So we pull it, we wean that animal, right? We put it through a livestock market in some cases, in a lot of cases. We put it on a truck and we commingle it from animals from other sources, right? We are dealing with an animal that's already hardwired to conceal the fact that it's sick, and we're trying to apply a diagnostic test that is a little bit better than a coin flip, okay? And so we've created this perfect storm where it is not surprising that at the end of the day, this is costing a lot of money, and it's something that we are not able to get we're not able to get ahead of, okay? And so all that being said is that we need to do something different. We need to do something different. I like this quote, and I was reminded of it again yesterday morning during the opening session when the video was playing describing the timeline from when the CAB brand was first founded. And then they talked about the struggles of getting it ingrained, not only commercially but internally as well. And that in itself, that's a good, that to me, that brought me back to this, because that took individuals that were willing to do something different and were willing and had the appetite to stick with it to see it through. Okay, it's the same thing here. Is that if we want to get ahead of this disease and we want to get some of that margin back, we've got to do something different than what we've been doing for the last 60 years, okay? Or at least something in addition to what we've been doing in the last. So again, the current mission of the Precision Cattle Technologies Division within Merck Animal Health is to develop solutions to help our customers assess risk, detect disease early, and make treatment decisions through predictive analytics, leading to improved productivity and validated appropriate antibiotic usage. Okay? And so before we jump into the whisper technology, I want to make an analogy to precision farming. Okay, does anybody in here, are you invested in the row crop business? We got one or two. Okay, so you might know where I'm coming from here. But precision ag is basically defined as farming management based on observing, measuring, and responding to variability not only within a field but between fields. Okay, and so they have for a long time have recognized that there's a lot of variability between fields, but also within a field with regard to soil type and the subsequent fertilizer and water needs within that field, as well as yield predictability throughout that field as well. And so one of the tools that is commonly used is called variable rate application, right? Where we have a nutrient density map of a certain field, and so now the field is no longer the unit of measure. Okay, we can break this field up into sectors, and within each of these sectors, we can lay down just the right amount of water, just the right amount of fertilizer, just the right amount of fungicide, just the right amount of seed in order to optimize the yield within each of these sectors that's reflective of the nutrient density in that specific sector. And so if we take that analogy and we try to apply it to BRD, we get somewhere where we're at today. So again, we come back to our current BRD diagnosis. We're going to focus on this chute. And in a few moments, I'm going to have an animal in the chute here, but that's where we're going to focus. And so again, understanding and recalling that the animals that come to the chute that have been tentatively detected with BRD, that animal can either be truly diseased or it may be an animal that looks like BRD but really isn't BRD. Okay? And in order to decide who really has BRD and how to treat that animal appropriately, we need more information. Okay? And so what we know is that when we bring an animal to the chute, and we got the crazy flying thermometer here, but when we take a rectal temperature from that animal, what we know based upon what's in the literature is that if that animal does have a fever, that animal's had that fever anywhere from a half a day up to about 5.5 days. Okay? Going back to the fact that animal is not wanting to let you know that it's sick. Okay? And so it begs the question, are all calves that meet our BRD diagnosis at the same stage of disease, and is temperature by itself specific enough for BRD to do a good job? Okay? And so that's where the whisper technology comes in. Donald, can you hand me that right there too? So the whisper technology, as it stands today, looks like this. Okay, it looks like a stethoscope. This is technology that was purchased by Merck roughly 2 years ago. We have continued to develop this technology. The way that it works, and I'll show you here in a moment, hopefully, assuming everything works here, is that we collect a sound coming from the chest of this animal. Okay, the sound is then converted to a digital file. We push it wirelessly to a software system, and we get a number from 1 to 5, 1 being relatively normal, 5 being an animal with severely compromised lung tissue. And what that number means, it gives us somewhat of a snapshot of the animal's lung health at that point in time. Okay? And so over the course of the last 18 to 24 months, we've learned a lot about this technology. Okay? And I'm going to run through that here just a moment. What we know at this point in time, or what we're comfortable at least conveying, is that the whisper score does give us an estimate of lung health. What we know based upon previous work is that as the whisper score, get my hands coordinated here with all this stuff, as the whisper score goes up, so does the amount of lung pathology as well. Okay? What we also have observed in prior studies is that as that whisper score goes up, so does that animal's risk of either getting repulled or that animal's risk of dying. Okay? And finally, with regard to field application, what we are appreciating more is using the whisper information in conjunction with that you're already collecting. Okay, so we're not saying throw away the rectal thermometer. What I'm saying is using this in addition to rectal temperature in order to turn the dials more precisely, if you will, okay? And so as you can see here, we've really classified BRD into 3 different buckets: mild, moderate, and severe. Okay, as an example, an animal with mild BRD may have a whisper score of 1 and a temperature less than 104. Okay, but what we see as we go through, as we make these progressions from mild to severe, so do we see the outcome variables as well. Okay, so as we move from mild to severe, the risk of that animal being a treatment success goes down, as does that animal's average daily gain as well. Okay, now, future to come full circle here, what we would, and bring it back to the fact of in precision ag, we know just the right amount of nitrogen or fertilizer to put on each particular sector. The goal here is to be able to individualize our treatment to the individual animal based upon their whisper score and rectal temperature profile, okay? So perhaps an animal with mild BRD, we're going to give something fairly cheap. We're not going to reach for that $40 drug. We're going to reach for something, that $3 product, okay? Whether that be a less potent antibiotic or possibly a non-antibiotic alternative, all right? Animals with moderate BRD, we might have to pull out that $40 drug. And with animals with severe BRD, we're going to have to use that drug and probably something else, okay? As well as management. But the question is, can we modify our treatment regimens to reflect BRD severity? So I just wanted to go through 3 applications real briefly before we show this of how it's being used in the field. Okay, so application number 1, and the primary value point is to reduce treatment costs, like we just said. So we see animals that are observed with signs of BRD. We see an animal that's with a rectal temperature of less than 104 and a whisper score of 1, and that would signify this group of animals right here. Now traditionally, because we pulled it, we're going to treat it, and we're probably going to treat it just like we would like everybody else, right? We're going to use some type of an expensive drug. With this whisper data, and what we have observed over the course of time is that instead of treating with those expensive drugs, we can reach for a cheaper alternative, whether that be a cheap antibiotic or an anti-inflammatory product, right? And obviously reduce our drug costs, but at the same time, not lose any performance, whether that be health or feed performance, compared to utilizing that more expensive product, right? What we have also found is that it's a great training tool for our labor force, okay? Especially if that person who is identifying those animals is also doing the doctoring, being able to pair up that whisper score with the clinical signs that animal showed allows that person to perhaps get a little bit more accurate in the cues of those animals to decide when to pull those animals in a more timely fashion, okay? So we can then get those animals to the chute faster, right? Application number 3, and we've learned this from our customers, is that we also provide a daily report of the whisper scores from the day before, okay? And so what we have learned from our customers is they use this as somewhat of a barometer, if you will, for the production system. And so a normal distribution of whisper scores looks something like this, okay, where you have most of your pulls being 2s and 3s, roughly 20% of them 1s, and the last 10% are 4s and 5s, okay? Now, if all of a sudden we see a distribution that is predominantly 1s, that should be a red flag to us, okay? And that tends to signify one of 2 things. One, we're either getting too aggressive in pulling animals, so we're pulling animals that just obviously aren't sick, we're just too aggressive, or we have some nutritional issues. So going back to our clinical signs, acidosis, grain overload, looks a lot like BRD. And in a lot of cases where we see a profile like this, we can go back into feed records, and within the last week there's been a feed bump, and we've got some nutritional challenges there, okay? Now conversely, if that distribution shifts to the right, then we're behind those animals. We are not pulling aggressive enough, okay? Now, the interesting thing, and we see this from time to time, is that when you see this profile within the first week, then we've probably bought this problem. So then we've got a procurement issue, right? And we have to have those conversations, all right? So there are opportunities for management tools here other than just deciding what to treat with, okay? And so with that, we'll get into the demonstration here. Could I just get one animal? Just one, yep. Generally, while we're getting an animal in, generally in the field, we have the computer is generally shoot side. Okay, so we set it up on the right side. Now, we talked about this earlier, but the Whisper technology is based on a piece of artificial intelligence called machine learning. And every time I bring that up, folks get nervous because it sounds out there, you know, right? It's just, what in the world is that? And why are you training a machine, right? Well, if any of you have one of these right here, you are... Yep. So, thank you. That would have made this interesting, right? Unfortunately, I can't do this unless they're in the chute. So that was helpful. But if you all have a smartphone, then you've probably been involved with machine learning at some point in time. So has anybody purchased something off of Amazon, and then you go the next day to your Facebook feed, and all of a sudden you're getting ads pushed to you on your Facebook feed that are very similar to what you just bought the day before? Well, that is machine learning. So the company that you bought that from has figured out what it is that you like, and so it's pushing things like that to you in the hopes that you would buy more. Okay? And so it's really the same kind of technology here, is that within this 8-second sound, the software is identifying 60,000 points within that 8-second sound file, and over time it's figured out what points are predictive of a downstream event and what points are garbage, okay? And so based upon that, generates that score of 1 to 5 that we talked about earlier. So I think we're good to go, right? Okay, all right. So assuming we're good to go, so obviously we're dealing with some distance challenges here. Generally this will be on the right side of the chute, and that's another important feature, is that the machine learning algorithm was trained on the right side, okay? And we can talk about that more as necessary. And so assuming all this is going to work, so where I'm aiming for here, if you will, is the elbow, the right elbow, and I'm going to go about 2 inches back and 2 inches up. All right? And you all can see that. And when I push record in the upper right-hand corner, you're going to see the countdown. Maybe. And it's definitely slow because of the distance here, but hopefully it'll get there. Okay. So as you can see here, well, one, it was really slow because of the distance. It's got to travel here. So you should be receiving this almost instantaneously. All right. Now, what you're seeing here, and actually this is a good example, is that because the system, obviously I did not do a good job of capturing this sound. It didn't like the way I captured this sound, so it's throwing up an error message. All right. So everything that's grayed out, it's not using, and it needs to have about 50 to 60% of that 8 seconds in order to be happy, if you will, with the information to generate a score. Okay? So we can try this again, but it tells you, you'll get these flags down here. This one says limited recording, check the position, clean the scope, basically redo it. So let's give it another shot. These heifers are pretty good to work with. They're not fighting that chute too awful much. Okay, so this animal is a 2, and it's been a 2 twice. So I'm pretty comfortable in the fact that it's a 2. All right. Now, we're dealing with heifers here. We're not dealing with young animals. So it could be that this heifer has had previous issues with BRD in the past. Obviously, she's healthy. She's growing. It's probably not an impediment, but there's probably old stuff there that's causing some issues, right? But this is basically what you would see. Now, if we wanted to enter this in this animal's ID number, if we wanted to wear her temperature and any other notes that we wanted to take, we would capture all that there. Click OK, and we capture, and all that information is then stored on a cloud-based server. Okay. So, and that cloud and all that information being pushed to the cloud is how we can do one of 2 things. One, we monitor that sound quality remotely, because if there are sound quality issues, then that would constitute at least a phone call to say, is everything working correctly? Did we just hire new labor? And if we continue to have issues, then we may need to visit, either retrain, clean the scope, what have you. Okay, so that allows us to do some quality control remotely. Okay, but also that gives us the ability to also provide these reports. And from a management standpoint, that's where the value is there in using that report in order to look back and see, give you a picture of what at least went on the day before. Okay. I think, well, we got one more in here. Let's just go ahead and do her too. Yeah. Hold on just a second. I'm going to put that door up on the other side. Boy, these preferred shoots are really nice. I really appreciate it. I'm kind of eating a little bit of crow here for that foremost stunt I pulled earlier. I apologize. Obviously, we got another animal in here. Let's try it again. Okay, another 2. Part of it may be the acoustics in here too, with everything rattling around in the back. That may be part of it as well. But you can see where we've got another 2. Now, if you want to compare these, well, I can't do it from here, and that's okay. But you can, if for whatever reason you're not happy with this, with the recording, and you don't want to save this recording, you don't hit save. Just repeat the recording and get a recording that you're happy with before you hit save and before it goes to the cloud-based server. So that being the case, any questions on that? I've just got a couple more slides. Sir.
Just out of curiosity, if you'd brought 5 calves through there that you bought last week, and the first 3 were runs, and they all at normal temperatures, and then you had a 2 that looked like that, and her temperature was 103.
Yeah.
Would you treat her as a 2?
So, and that's a great question. And so we are working to generate data like that. We're not. Sorry. Yes. So the question was basically what would be the treatment recommendation for, say, an animal that was a whisper score of 2 and a temperature of, say, 103, right? We have at the end of the day, you know, we are working to generate information like that, but we also understand the veterinarian, your veterinarian, your herd veterinarian, he or she is going to be that one that is going to make those calls. Because they may be seeing something outside of what this says too. Okay, so we don't want to put a veterinarian in a bad spot, right? And so now that being said, you know, an animal with a whisper score of 2 and a temperature of 103, it's got an elevated temperature and it's got an elevated lung score. There's probably something going on, okay? Now, whether or not what the decision would be at that point is going to be for your veterinarian to decide. There was another, ma'am, yes. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, so the question was, if you get a 2 score, what do you treat it with? Again, that kind of follows suit, is that we're generating some of that data. That would be for your husband to decide at that point in time. But knowing that an animal with a 2, if it has been identified as being an outlier, and you've brought it to the chute, and we see a whisper score of 2, I'd also want that rectal temperature information as well, okay, to get an idea of how best to treat that. But given that your husband's a veterinarian, I would allow him to make that decision at that point in time. So yeah, so the question could it be a cheaper drug? Well, in the field, the answer is yes. So what's being done in the field is that, say, animals that meet a whisper score of 1 and have a temperature of less than 104, the majority of those customers would go for a cheaper antibiotic. Yep. And again, that's all based on anecdotal observation, but that's how it's being utilized. Sir. Yeah, so that's a great point. So what happens if you don't have internet connection, right? So it'll still function at the chute, okay? Do you have internet at your house? Sure. So when you bring that computer back to your house, it hooks up to internet, and then all that information is sucked up at that point in time. So you can still go about your day-to-day business, and then once you're within distance of your Wi-Fi, it'll suck that up. No, sir. You get this information chute side. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So the question, just to make sure, the question was, do you get this information chute side even without internet? And the answer is yes. Any other questions? Sir, yes. Yep. Yes. Okay, great point. Yes. So we would have never pulled these animals to begin with. That's a great point. So the question was, these animals scored a 2, and the only way we knew they were 2 is because we're demonstrating the technology, right? We would have never pulled these animals. And so I want to make sure that we're all clear is that, one, this is not an early detection tool, all right? We still have to identify those animals and get them to the chute, okay? The prevalence of BRD in animals of this age is relatively low, okay? So if my bias would be is that because they are a 2, there's one of 2 things going on. One, there's they've had BRD at some point time in the past, possibly, that was either diagnosed and treated or not, okay? Or they are big enough that they are beyond outside of what the algorithm was trained on. And so the sounds coming out of of an 18-month-old heifer might be different than the sounds coming out of a 7-month-old steer. Okay. So it opens up a whole new avenue of thinking here in terms of where the potential gaps might be. So, and so if we ran all these guys through, I'm sure, I would assume not all of them are B2s. Okay. Any other questions? Sir?
Is there more information goes in as far as producers using the product in a span of age ranges? Will you be able to have a wider sample on ages of the animals and what their sounds are?
Okay. Yes. So the question was, I guess your question was, is there a stopping point that we don't want to go over with regard to using the product? Is that right?
More or less.
Okay.
And then after a certain point, being in the field, like you'll have more data collected on 2-year-olds or 3-year-olds.
Yeah. So right now, the tool is predominantly used in the feed yard and in backgrounding production systems, just because the prevalence of BRD is higher. Okay. And so we most of the use is there. Now, as far as minimum age goes, the technology was developed in animals that were 300, 350 pounds and higher. So on those babies, I would be very reluctant to tell you to use it and believe anything that you see. Okay? In those younger animals, the heart sounds coming out of the chest, they overwhelm almost everything. And so when you get below 300 pounds and the ability to use this confidently goes down as well. Now you bring up a great point with regard to using it in older animals, and this is something we've discussed here in our booth over the last couple days, is what are the real applications at the cow-calf level, right? And so in my mind, and I don't have any data to support this, okay, first and foremost, is that we have not done this work. But if I take a page from the dairy industry, what we know based on the literature is that dairy females going into the lactating herd with prior lung pathology, those females have a reduced ability, their milk production is reduced, and their longevity is reduced as well. Okay, and so extrapolating that over to these guys, could it be that if they do have lung pathology, are they at risk? Is their longevity in the herd at risk? Okay, so could it be that this becomes an additional screening tool at the time of heifer development? Okay, I don't know that. We have not done that work, but that could be something that is where the majority of the application could be at the cow-calf level. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much. If we could switch back over to the PowerPoint real quickly, I just want to throw up my, so we've talked about all of this. We've talked about the BRD diagnosis and how we want to individualize therapy decisions. But all that being said, this is our first step out there in this space. We are working on other technologies to bolt onto this, as well as expanding into other segments of the beef industry and other areas as well. And so my contact info is here. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to speak to you. Unfortunately, I got to make a mad rush to the airport, or I would be back in our booth. But I would encourage you that if you do have questions, please visit the booth. We have information on the technology. We have other folks there that can answer your questions. But again, please don't hesitate to reach out with anything else. So, thank you.
How about a round of applause for Dr. Jason Nickell?